Okay, zegt de Heilige Mishnah. Almona she'omer. An almona was hat gesagt, afshi loses me base by me. I don't want to move out of the house that I live with my husband. You say, you move out, we don't want to keep you here. We'll support you, but move out of the house. And she says, no, I want to stay in the house. They don't have a right to say, you go to your parents' house, and we'll send you your parnas over there. They have to be mazing her, and they have to give her a dwelling place, kafir covered. So, for instance, if she lived in a big house with her husband together, they don't have a right to squeeze her into a small apartment. They have to give her a dira that she's used to. Amr, what if she said the opposite? If she loses with Abba, I don't want us to live with you. I actually want to live with Abba. Then the Yosh have a right to tell her, if you live together with us, then you have mezainas. Then you have mezainas. But if you don't live with us, so you might ask, why would they care? And why do they have a right not to give her mezainas if she lives with Abba? Adarabba, that's better for them. They have the house to themselves. So the Gemara is going to talk about that. If she says the reason why I don't want to live in the same house as the Yosayim is because I'm young and they're young, and it's not tznius, there's a problem of tznius. And of course, this isn't speaking with the Yosayim or her children. These might be children that the husband had from a previous marriage. Then she has a right not to live there, and they're still mechuyev to give her mezainis because it's a good time. It's not appropriate for a young woman to live with young men. Dr. Heilige Gemara, Tanu Rabban, Mishtameshes b'mother k'derech shemishtameshes b'chaye bayla. She could benefit from all of the amenities of her husband's house, just like she did when her husband was alive. The avodim, she can use the avodim, u'shvachos and shvachos k'derech shemishtameshes b'chaye bayla. The karim, the kosasos, the pillows and mattresses. Just like she did with her husband was alive. With the silver and gold kalim, where do you see this chus that she has? Because this is one of the Tanai Ksuba that her husband was machayev himself to. And that is, you will live in my household if I die, and you will have you'll have Mozon, sustenance from my estate. Call you may meger amalusayich bevesi. All the times that you're living as no man in my house. In other words, until you get remarried. Tani Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef was medayik from the bevesi that he sticks in. Call you may meger amalusayich bevesi is the bevesi below the. If I have a house that can accommodate you normally, yes, then you have a right to live in the house. But if you only have a big seat, which is like a tent, a small little hut, there she doesn't have a right to stay there. And Rashi says that was like kibul love. If it's a small little hut where there's not enough room for the assignment man for her, that already the husband was not makabel upon himself in the Maksuba to evict his children. So if there's not enough room for both of them, then she has to move out. Omer Rav Nachman said, Yisayim shemachu mother almana. What if the Yisayim went and sold? Let's say the almana lived in a little house that the husband had her live in even before he was nifter. That was where she lived, and the Yisayim went and sold that house. Their mechira is not a mechira at all because they don't have a right to sell it because it's part of the Tnai Ksuba. What's the difference between this and the case of Rav Asi or Rabbi Yochanan, where you see the Yisraelim could sell something that's meshubah to the Ksuba? Normally, when there's only nechasim muatim, then the banos have the right to mezainos, and we said that the banim have to be shoyl al psocha. And we learned that the chasam wata means that there's not enough to have 12 months worth of mazoin. That's called the chasam wata. Nevertheless, even though those nechasim were meshubit to the tnak shuba of providing mazoinos to the banos, nevertheless, mashamachru machru, they're the mechir is a good mechir. So why the shibud for mazoinos over here doesn't prevent the sale, yet the shibud to give her place to live does prevent the sale? And for the Gemara, Hasam lo mishtadi lo mechayim, mazoinos the chiv only comes lacher misa, but hacha, the place for a woman to live, mishtadi lo mechayim, the shibud really mechayim. So since the shibud came before the Yisraelim even got a connection and the ownership of the property, therefore they cannot sell it. But if they got the ownership of the property at the same time as the shibud came after the death, then they would have a right to sell. Amar Abaye said, Naktina, we learned, mother almana shenofa. What if the almana had a house that she lived in and it collapsed? So what was meshubed to her? This place, and it collapsed. So Eina Yorshin Chayavin of Noisa. The Yorshim don't have a chiyuv to rebuild it, and the svar is very partial because the shibud ksuba was that her dwelling is for her. But if the dwelling is no longer there, then there is no chiyuv to house her anymore. Tani Nami Hochi, we learned another grace as well. Mother almana shenafal Eina Yoshim Chayavin of Noisa. The Yorshim don't have to rebuild it. And not only that, even if she says, I'll rebuild it, I'll pay for it. You don't listen to her, she has no right to rebuild it because they're not mukhlif to let her live there anymore. What if it was getting shvach, was about to collapse, and she paid to strengthen it? What is the halach? And we know that the chatchila, she has no right to do it, because their chiyuv is only to support her until it collapses. So they don't have to fix it, and she has no right to fix it. Nevertheless, she did it wrongfully. What is halacha? Do they still have to let her live in it? Or only as long as it would have anyway have stood? Zaktimor Teku, we don't know the answer. Amar Iyaf, what if she said that I don't want to live in your house, I want to live in my father's household? The Mishnah says they have a right to withhold the zanis. Why shouldn't they give her mezainis even though she's in their father's household? So big deal. So she's not living in their household. So this Mishnah is a right to Rafuna, that it's a problem for them if she doesn't live in their household. The fact that there's many people together in the house, that brings bracha. And Rashi says, when people live together, there's a synergy, they help each other, and they all do things. And therefore, umazel the rabbim odif. And since everyone's working together, there's a greater mazel, and there'll be overall success. There are those who learn that it's more specific. When you're living together, there's the benefit of economies of scale. One light lights up the whole room. They don't need a light for each room. Or you can cook a little. If you cook for one person, you're going to cook more for that person than you would cook for each person if there's a rabbi. So actually, it costs them more. If she's living by herself, not with them, her mezainis will cost them more, and therefore they're not mechuyev. Fact, Gemara, so is that a reason to say that she has no right to any mezainis? So at least give her what they would have had to give her anyway if she lived in the house. But why are they taught from giving her anything? So in fact, they're not. In fact, they do have to give her. So let's say if she lives by herself, it would cost $100 mezainis a week. But if she lives with the group, it will only cost $90 a week. So they still have to give her $90 a week, even though she's not living in her house. Lashon Chachamim bracha. When you learn the Lashon Chachamim, you could learn how to get bracha. Lashon Chachamim Moshe. If you learn the Lashon Chachamim, you can learn how to become wealthy. And Lashon Chachamim, if you learn the words of the Chachamim, Marpe, you'll learn how to heal yourself. Bracha hada amar. From the Lashon Chachamim, you learn bracha like what we just learned. That birchas habayis beruba. By working together with Harabim, that brings you bracha. Oisher, where do you see from the Lashon Chachamim anything of how to become wealthy? It's not be learned in the Mishnah. Hamoicher peres lechaver. Someone is selling pears to his friend. So in order for his friend to be cutting those pears, his friend has to make a meshicha on those pears, a kinyan. Now, if it's a big bundle of pears, a big pile of pears, that can be somewhat difficult. But what happens if moshach v'loy moda? The purchaser made meshicha on the fruit, but didn't measure the fruit. Kana, the purchaser will still be kind. Measuring isn't ma'akiv to the kinyan. But modat v'loy moshach, but if he only measured it and he didn't make meshicha loy kana, and in fact, then he'd be able to back out. The lakech will be able to back out. The meichel can back out. So what do you do in order to affect the sale right away? If he was smart, it sounds from Rashi like it means if the buyer is smart and he doesn't want the seller to back out, what he'll do is he'll tell the owner, I want to rent the space underneath the pears. So then automatically he'll be koined because it's his chotzer. And therefore, he doesn't have to go through the tircha of stopping everything. So this is a eitzah how to become wealthy. The eitzah is to get your transaction done quickly by ramping them up. So you see, when you learn the halachas of the chachamim, you learn how to become wealthy. And marpe, where do you see from the words of the chacham how to heal yourself? Titnan lo yilos adam chitin yanich al gabe makoseh bepesach. Don't chew wheat and it creates like a paste and put that on your makkah pesach that helps it heal. Because it becomes chometz. So you see, obviously, why would someone do this? Because it's helping the makkah. So you see, refuah, you know how to do refuah from the brayah. So they ask, this is the brayah. Do you know how many times you find in the words of Chazal direct refuahs? We've learned so many gemaras where it talks about refuahs. This is good for this is good for that. So why are we bringing a raya from here which is talking about chometz? So that's exactly what we're trying to say. From the halachas of the Rabbanan, even things that aren't directly addressing the issue, as an aside, you'll always pick up good tidbits of information. That's the point. If you learn Torah, you'll pick up all these other benefits and tidbits of information. Like the famous mashal of the Malbim. Somebody once asked the Malbim how the Malbim used to be a poet. He wrote beautiful poetry. If somebody once asked the Malbim, I'm an English major. He probably was a Polish major, whatever her language was. But I'm an English major, and I struggle. I studied English my whole life, and it's a struggle for me to write beautiful poetry. You never studied language in your life, and you write the most beautiful poetry. How is it possible? So the Malbim told him, you reminded me of a story where a guy's walking by a department store, and he sees someone walking out with the most beautifully wrapped package. And he asked this fellow, wow, where did you get that beautiful wrapping from? He says, I got it from the store. He says, really, it must have costed you a fortune. What did they charge for such a wrapping? He said, it was free. Didn't charge me a penny. He says, you totally serious? He said, yeah. So he runs in and he says, I want that wrapping that that guy has. But that's why I want exactly that wrapping. And he takes it, he's walking down to the store. He says, sir, you got to pay. He says, what do you mean I got to pay? The guy before got it for free. He says, are you kidding me? The guy before bought a $5,000 appliance and he asked us to wrap it. So we wrapped it for free. You only want the wrapping paper that you got to pay for. So like the Malbim, if you learn the Torah, you get everything else for free. You want only the pitch of gears that you're going to pay. Tana Rabban. The Shas Piti Rasa Shal Rebbe, when Rebbe died, and this is a very fascinating Gemara. Omar Livni Anitzara. He called and he says, I need my children. I need my children. Nichnusu Banav Etzlo. His children came to him because he called them, he summoned them. Amr he told them, this is the instruction I want to give you. A, Hizaru b'chvay dipram. Be careful with the cover of your mother after I die. B, Ner yehidoluk b'mkaymai. Where I sit normally, I want there to be a ner lit there, and we're going to soon see in a moment. It's because Rebbe came back every week, every Shabbos he came home after he died. And 3 is shulchan yehe'arach b'mkaymai. The table should be set in my place, and mita tehei mutzas b'mkaymai. And my bed should be there. And Yosef Chafni, Yosef from Haifa, and Shimon Ephrazi, and Shimon from Ephras Haim shimshuni b'chayai, they were my mishamshin during my life. The haim yishamshuni b'moishi, they're going to be mishamish me after I die. We're going to see what this means. The first thing he told him is be concerned, be careful with the covenant of your mother. Frank the Gemara, I need Rebbe to instruct his children. Doiraisi. Isn't there a mitzvah doiraisa? Keep it avayim. Nechsev kabel es abicha v'asimecha. Zok the Gemara enichnami. But Ashes av havoi. This wasn't their mother. It was his wife, but it wasn't their mother. So you might ask, so why did he tell them he zaru b'chvoid imchem if it wasn't their mother? So there are those who learn that although it wasn't their mother, but she raised him. Since she raised him, he refers to her as imchem. So then the question is, well, maybe then has a din of aim already, and is there any way mechuyev to be mechaber? The one of the mefarshim say you learn from here that if someone's father remarries to another woman, the children are supposed to call her ima. The children are supposed to call her ima. I know of a specific family who when their father remarried someone I grew up with, they weren't sure what to call his wife. Should they call her Ima? Should they call her something else? But eventually they adapted the name Ima. But there are those who bring right from this Gemara that you're supposed to call your father's wife Ima. That could sometimes be difficult. Okay, so the Gemara weiter. Eishesav nami dairaisi. Weiter, I don't need Rebbe to instruct his children to keep a mitzvah dairaisa, and your father's wife is a mitzvah dairaisa. The Tanya kabed es avicha. It could have said kabed avicha. What's up is the es avicha. There's a ribui. The es imecha. So the es of avicha, zu eshes avicha, is coming to be marba that your father's wife, you have to be mechabed. The yes imecha. So the es of es imecha, zu baal imcha. If your mother remarries a man, you have to be mechabed that man. And the ve'est of vav yisera is the rabbish is a chicha gadol to tell you that you also have to have covered for your older brother. So therefore, why did Rebbe need to instruct his children to have covered for his wife? This chiyuv is only when she's alive, when he's alive. When the father's alive, you have to have covered for his wife. After your father dies, there is no chiyuv deraisa to have covered for his wife, and therefore, he had to instruct him. So there's a couple of shilas here. First of all, never mind the chiyuv of the mother. What about Eishes Chover? She's an Eishes Chover, and Eishes Chover you have to have covered for. It's covered Torah. So there are those who learn that maybe Eishes Chover there is no chiyuv la'achamis either. But most achronim, to quote Rabbi Elephant, vehemently argue and say avada there's a mitzvah of covered for an Eishes Chover as well. So they want to say that there's a mitzvah of covered for Eishes Chover, but Eishes Avicha there's also a mitzvah of yira, and that's why Eishes Chover wouldn't be enough. So therefore, he had to instruct them to have covered and yira for his almana. Now, what about achicha gadol? There's a big shaila about achicha gadol. Now, during COVID, in our backyard minyan, there was a bar mitzvah of two non-identical twins. And we all know them, they daven by us. It's Yisachar and Yeshua Hollinger. And they're twins. So they went through the entire sugya as a debate. Their pshat was a very entertaining debate. If there's a mitzvah to be mechabed your older brother, because that was the child of the two twins, if one twin has to be mechabed the other twin because he's older. So there are those who learn it's only the bechor, but there are those who learn it's any older sibling, even a sister, and there are those who learn that it's only if they're brothers from the father, not from the mother. There are those who learn dafka from the mother. And the Zohar brings down that the reason why you have to have covered for your older brother is because he navigated his mother's birth canal before you did. He was in his mother's womb before you were. And had he damaged your mother, you would never have been born. So you have to have a chorus of Torah to anyone who was born before you that they didn't cause damage to your mother's uterus and to your mother's birth canal, and that's why you were able to be conceived. But based on that, then it should only be if it's a sibling from the mother, and it should be for all siblings, both older sisters and older brothers. Most treat this old that it's both. Now, the other interesting thing is this chiyuv to be mechabed your older brother is a pshat because it's also covered for your father. If you're mechabed your older brother, that's showing respect for your father. Or is it a direct chiyuv to your brother? And what's the nafkamina? There's actually two nafkaminas. If the father is moichel, what if the father says that I don't care if you have covenant for him? If it's a din in him himself, you still have to be mechabed him. But if it's only a din as be mechabed your father, if your father's moichel, then it's not an issue. The other nafkamina is if the brother's moichel. If it's a din in the brother can be moichel. But if it's a din in the father wants you to be mechabed him, then he can't be moichel. So these are the shilas around this question. After the meet of the father. That's correct. Oh, that's right. If it is in the brother, it will be relevant. If not, Ner yehidoluk b'mkoymoi and shulchan ye'arich b'mkoymoi and mita temutzas b'mkoymoi. My time. Why would that be necessary if Rebbe is no longer alive? So tomorrow, because kol bei shimshi, every ben hashmoshes, and Rashi tells us it means ben hashmoshes of Erev Shabbos. So why doesn't it specify? Because the main ben hashmoshes that everyone is tumbling about, that's relevant, that you're rushing to ready, the ben hashmoshes that we normally talk about is the ben hashmoshes of Erev Shabbos. So the Gemara refers to Erev Shabbos as the ben hashmoshes. So Kol Bei Shimshei have a osila besa, he would come home. He had visitation rights on the weekend. So therefore, since he was in the house on a regular basis, he wanted to have a setup. He wanted his nair so he could learn. He wanted his table. He wanted his mita. And Kiveger brings down a fascinating shtickle. I'm sorry? He was dead. Yeah, this is Afra Misa. Yeah. So let's have a look at Kiveger. Kol Bei Shimshi, Zoktoisis. He didn't show up in his tachrichim for Erev Shabbos. He came in his finest Shabbos garb. Shahaya loivish b'Shabbos. The same shtamel and kaftan that he wore on Shabbos when he was alive. That's what he came down alive. And not only that, upoiter es rabim b'kiddush hayoim. He's the one who made kiddush. You know, they say a story over where this Rebbe died, and his son, the Rebbe, used to give his father shishi every week, even though his father wasn't there. And he'd say, Baruch Hashem, so Litvak says, Knacker, let me see you give your father Hagba. Okay? So, but he made kiddush every week. Rebbe was not like every other mitzvah, that every other mace that's part of the mitzvahs. Ki tzadikim, chayim, tzadikim are alive. Rebbe was alive. Upoitrin b'kiddush, and he could pater you with kiddush. Sefer Chasidim. So Kiveger brings down from the Sefer Chasidim. So they explain that while he's up there, sure he's chafish min mitzvahs, but when he comes down here in human form with his Shabbos begodim, he's surely considered part of this world, and he was even moitzi the oilam with kiddush. So what happened? Ahi Bei Shimsha, there was one Erev Shabbos in the afternoon. Also, Shivavosa, the neighbor came to visit Mrs. Rebbe, and she was knocking on the door. Kakari Abava, she was saying, Mrs. Rebbe, can I come in? Amr Amse, so the maid in the house told the person knocking, Shasiku, please be quiet. The Rebbe Yosef, the great Rebbe, is sitting here. Kivon de Shama, once Rebbe knew that the secret was out and that people knew that he came back, Shuvloi also, Rebbe stopped coming. It'll make everyone else look bad. You're probably not such a big tzaddik. You don't come back. So they didn't get visitation rights. So maybe they weren't as great as Rebbe. So since Rebbe didn't want that comparison to be made, we know Rebbe was the biggest anav. The more says Rebbe Batlanova, right? So Rebbe definitely didn't want that to occur, so he stopped coming. I wonder what that did to the relationship between Mrs. Rebbe and her neighbor. Now my husband doesn't come visit me anymore. Zok Gemara, Yosef Chafni and Shimon Afrosi Haim Shimshuni b'chayai. They were mishamish me during my lifetime, and therefore Behaim Yishimshuni b'moisi. They're going to continue to be mishamish. Savar mina v'adinoma u'dekamar. we would have thought that it's referring to in this life, meaning after I die, they'll be Isaac in like the higher, they'll be Isaac in the Oren. But even the Chazu, the Kodim are say, but they got buried first, they died. They died and were buried before Rebbe. So obviously, he's not referring to them carrying his Oren around. Amri Shmami na lahu alma hudek amar. He meant in Yeneveld, they're going to be Meshamishmi. Behind the Amar Hachi. So why did he speak it out? He didn't have to say anything. They were there. They would have taken care of him. What did he need? Why did he need to announce this? Is the Lamri Milsa Voilu, because he didn't want people to think that these people were not Tzaddikim Gemur. And people would have said if they died before Rebbe that they probably had a virus. And the other, why didn't they die until after they had a virus? Since they were Meshamish Rebbe, so Rebbe's schools kept them alive. But now that Rebbe is dying, they died. He didn't want people to say that. He wanted people to know that they're tzaddikim and gemurim, and they actually died to be Meshamishim. Now the question is, what type of shimush does one need in Yenevelt? So the Rishonim say the shimush is not that anything needs to be done for him, but a Rebbe goes with a Rebbe never walks down the street alone. He always has a shamus with him. So they were always there. They're always in the Naden. They're around him. Amar lehen, which means they got a pretty good view as well, because they got right into the nucleus. Amar lehen l'chachmei Yisrael in the Torah. Then he said, "Now I need a chachmei Yisrael." He summoned them to his bed. Nichnasu et l'chachmei Yisrael. Amar, he told them, "Al tesabduni b'ayoros." Don't do hespedim for me b'ayoros. And Rashi says, "What are ayoros? Ayoros gedolos alakfor." Ayoros are cities that are smaller than that are greater, that are larger than villages, but who krochen gedolim lehem. But krochen are bigger than them. So if Toronto would be a krach, maybe Barry would be an ear, and maybe Bolyort would be a kvar. So I don't want a husband in the Ayoros, and v'yeshivu yeshiva la'acher shloshim yom. Instead of a yeshiva by my kaver to learn Torah after 30 days. So that's the second thing he said. And the third thing he says is, this is who's going to succeed me. Shimon b'ni chacham. Shimon, my son, is the biggest chacham. He has chachma. We're going to have to see Lagabi what is irrelevant, what responsibilities are giving him. Gamliel, my son, is Nasi. He's going to be the Nasi. And Chanina bar Chama, Yosy b'rosh. Chanina bar Chama is going to be the Rosh Hashiva. So, al tesabduni b'ayoros. Don't give me a husband in the big cities. Sover mina mishum tircha hu dekamar. At first, we thought that it was because of tircha, because the bnei kfarim are going to have to come schlep to the ayoros, and he didn't want to be matriach the bnei kfarim to come to the ayoros. But in the krochen, wouldn't be a problem. But given the chazit the kasabti the krochen v'ka'asu kula, but once they saw that even in the very large cities, everybody came, aside from the Kfarim and aside from the Ayoros. So clearly there was no concern of Tircha, because when they made the husband and the big Krochim, they were all coming anyway. So clearly Rebbe's intent was not Tircha. So what was Rebbe's intent? He did it out Kavod HaTorah. In other words, it's only Kavod HaTorah if there's the largest crowds brought for the covet of the Nifter Rebbe. If he went to little villages and there was a small little Levayalach, that would not be appropriate. So of course, all the Rishonim ask, I don't understand. Rebbe was known for Anova. He's worried about his Kavod HaTorah. So there's a lot of different pshatim on it. One of the pshatim they say is that he doesn't have a right to be moichel on his Kavod Lachem Yisosai, only during his Misa. And those who say is that the Kavod HaTorah fathers that they have to come out. And the third reason is that Nosi Shemakal Akavoida Ain't Kvoida Makal. Al Nosi, he was mechuyev to create this great Levaya. And then he said, Hoishivu Yeshiva Lachash Loshim Yom. Why after 30 days? Why should we stop the Hespedim after 30 days? Is the Loya Difna Mi Moshe Rabbeinu, because he didn't want to be any greater than Moshe Rabbeinu. The Chsiva Yivchu B'nei Yisrael Os Moshe Ba'arba Smoya V'Shloshim Yom. So he didn't want to spend in more than 30 days, because that's the length of time that they were master Moshe Rabbeinu. Plus in Yoimin, Saptin Biyamama Vilelia. For 30 days, they had spayed them round the clock. But Mikan Ve'elech, at 30 days, then Sabtu Biyamama V'garsi Vilelia, or Sabtu Vilelia V'garsi Biyamama. They either were mastered by day and they learned at night, or vice versa. So when did they do it by day? When did they do it by night? The reason why they had it set up this way is because some days you're not allowed to say Espedim. So if you weren't allowed to say husband that day, then you say husband by night. So that's how they adjusted. Ad the Sapti Tracy Yachish Shata until it was for a year. So then we have the Kasha again. Moshe Rabbeinu only had it for 30 days, not for a year. So what's Pshat? So one of the Pshatim that I heard was that when Moshe died, they forgot 2,000 halachas. And they were very angry at Yeshua at the time because he forgot those halachas. But that created an Avelis. People were constantly feeling the Avelis of Moshe Rabbeinu because they had forgotten these halachas. So therefore, it wasn't necessary to be maspid, but by Rebbe they were maspid. Ahu Yoima Dash Kavase, the Rebbe. Now the question is if this means on the day of the death of Rebbe. Oh, that's right. That's right. So Ahu Yoima Dash Kavase, the Rebbe, the day that Rebbe died or the day of his Levaya, is how most people learn. Nafke Baskala, there's a Shara Komit, this is the first short site, but the Pashup Shara was the day of the Levaya, and the Levaya was on a Friday. Nafke Baskala, a Baskala came out, the Amr and it said, Kol Dahava Bashkaspe the Rebbe, whoever was by the Levaya of Rebbe, Mizuman Hulachaye Oilam Abo Halav Oilam Abo. So the Pashup Shara is because there's such a hashpah of ruchnis when someone dies that it's available for grabs. But there are those who learn that it was a special story. And I'll get to that story in just a minute. Who kovis? There was this washer, and there's a shaila if this was a tzaddik, if he was a rasha, if he was a big tzaddik. But kol yoima have a asi kamei every single day. Oh, I want to stop for a second because Shlomo just pointed out that this is the Leviner. We learned the Zoysa Bracha last night. We see that for 12 months, they continue to be masked Rebbe by day or by night. So I asked, how come they did that more than by Moshe Rabbeinu? So I said by Moshe Rabbeinu, there was a greater availance because anyway, people were missing. But there's another pshat that we're trying to say from another pasuk that we learned last night. It says, Vayitnu Yimei B'chiyei Moshe. To tell us that by Moshe Rabbeinu also, there was a time where it went on by day and not by night, and that was also for 12 months. So by Moshe Rabbeinu, you also had that by day and not by night. And by Moshe Rabbeinu, there's no problem because there were no days that you didn't have a spade in the days of Moshe Rabbeinu. So therefore, by day, they were masked, but not at night. Anyway, so this kovis, Kol Yoim Hava Osa Kamei. Every day he used to come and greet Rebbe. Ahu Yoim, a punkt, the day of the Levaya, he couldn't make it. And now he heard, but he missed out. He missed out that he was mezuman l'chaya ha'olam haba. Even the Shamahachi, when he heard this, Solak le'igra, he climbed up to the top of a building, b'nafal ara, and he fell down. He committed suicide. Umis, and he died. Yotza baskal v'amr afahu koivis, even the end of their koivis, mezuman hu l'chaya ha'olam haba. So the shail is someone who commits suicide, mezuman l'chaya ha'olam haba. So the Pashup shot that they say is he didn't jump. He went up there and he was so distraught by the fact that he missed out that opportunity that he fell. And the Vada wasn't suicide. But there are those who learn that since he was so distraught from having missed his opportunity, that even though he did suicide, that's not that doesn't take away his Elam. And they learn from me, Rahman al-Khan, people who commit suicide because they're not mentally well, you could give them a levaya and you could bury them with Yidden because that wasn't necessarily his fault. But there are those who learn that the whole story is different. This Levaya was on Friday, and people were so busy with the Levaya that they came home late for Shabbos. And the Rebbe made a nace that for the people of the Levaya, it stayed light longer that Friday, and they were able to continue doing the malachas, and until everybody had a chance to fill up a barrel with water and set up the fire for his food, Hashem made it that the sun shouldn't set. So therefore, people were concerned. We did malacha very late. Maybe we were machal Shabbos. So for that, the Baskel came out and said, not to worry. Everyone who was by the Levaya of Rebbe is Muzmal Chayil. But this Kovis, it was not Levaya who was also doing malacha late. So that's why he went and jumped off a roof. And there are those who learn that when someone's doing tshuva and he knows he's mechuyev onshim, it's not considered suicide if he kills himself. That could be mutter for someone doing tshuva to be very satisfied. It could be that was shot in the face. Shimon ben Chacham, this, if anything, is the most contentious part of the will. Who is taking over? Who's the next Rebbe? Who is the next Rebbe? Micah Amar. What exactly was Rebbe trying to say by stating Shimon ben Chacham? Even though my smartest son is Shimon, Gamliel b'ni Nasi. Gamliel, my son, is the Nasi, which is very schwer. It's bad enough that he's not. It's bad enough that he's not the smartest. You got to give him a dig on the way out. But we're going to soon see why he was the Nasi, what he wanted to bring out. Omar Levi. Levi said, "Shricha l'meimar." This is something that Rebbe needed to say. It's pashut that Rebbe Gamliel should be the Nasi. And we're going to soon see what this kasha was. Now, Levi, we know, was a handicapped person because he once was trying to demonstrate kida, and he got injured and he became permanently handicapped. And the Gemara tells us the reason why that happened is because he tiach panav klape maila. It needed rain, and it wasn't raining. And Levi screamed out to Hashem, "You don't care? What we're riffraff? We're not important. You don't care?" So he took a good aggressive stance towards Rebbeinu Shalom. Because of that, when he demonstrated Kiddush, which in and of itself was a dangerous maneuver, the Kiddush on him caused that he should become handicapped. So Rab Shimon bar Rebbe said, the son of the Nasi said, Shricha loch ulumetalosach. We definitely need my father to have said that Rabbi Gamliel is the Nasi. I'm sorry, that Shimon is the Chacham. We definitely needed that Professor said that Shimon is the Chacham. And you need to have your handicap, and you should remember not to jump so fast and maybe be too aggressive with your comments. What shot? Zok to Gemara, my kasha. What was the kasha of Levi? What do I need it for? His kasha was because a kraka amar. Do I need Rebbe to tell us a pasuk? Besamamlocha nasan liyahiram ki hu abachar. Of course, the Malchus goes to Yehoram, who was Shlomo's oldest child, because he was a Bechor. So Zok Gemara, if that's the case, that was Levi's kasha. So I needed to tell me that I should go to Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel was the oldest, so of course it's going to go to Rabbi Gamliel. But the answer is, the reason why you need Rabbi to tell us this is because Yehoram, although he became a Rasha later on, at the time that Shlomo said that he was going to become the next Melech, he was not just the oldest son. He was appropriate. He filled his father's shoes. He was a tremendously choshev mensch. It was befitting of him. Rabbi Gamliel was not. And that's why it was necessary for Rebbe to say Rabbi Gamliel would be the Nasi, because Rabbi Gamliel was not on the Madrega of Rebbe, so you wouldn't have automatically said that he would take over for his father. For Rebbe, my time of Avarachi. So why Taka did Rebbe appoint his son Rabbi Gamliel to take over as a Nasi if Rabbi Gamliel didn't really fill his shoes? Even though he wasn't the biggest Chacham, he was a Yorech Chet like his father. And therefore, Rebbe wanted to say, the Chachma might be here, but the person who's going to take over the Messias, he has to have Yorech Chet. It says, Mishavat Rebbe Bata Kedusha. So the answer, he wasn't on the same level of his father, but he was the most appropriate. He was the biggest Yerush Shamayim. He was the person that would be the best to be the Nasi. And of course, this goes into a whole shaila of who takes over. Who takes over? So there's actually some Sofer who talks about the Rabbisneve. Someone's a Rebbe, do we automatically say that it goes to a son? And he says, no, it doesn't automatically go to a son. So there's a whole tumble in the Achronim as to if Rabbanah goes over. So most Achronim hold that once it's a question of money, because there's a salary involved, it's a position, then it actually does go Yerusha to the son. but when that's not the case, then it's up to the tzibur to select, and in fact, it doesn't go to Yerusha. So, as a matter of fact, there are those who say, I don't understand. There was such a machlokes in Baba after the Rebbe died. Why didn't he leave a will? Who's going to be the next Rebbe? Reb Shlomo Halberstam was an Oyer Shalom, V'Roidev Shalom. He would have done anything to avoid machlokes. So why didn't he leave it a will? It's because he held that, there's a earlier Chaim who say that a Rebbe does not transfer to Yerusha. It has to be the will of the people. So how am I to dictate the will of the people? The people have to pick who they want to be their malik. Zog to more weiter. Chanina bar Chama Yoshav Barosh, or Yosy Barosh. Rebbe said that Chanina bar Chama should be the Rosh Hashiva. But like Rabbi Chanina refused to accept the post as Rosh Hashiva. Why? Rabbi Afis was 2.5 years older than him, and he didn't feel appropriate taking over the yeshiva. He felt Rabbi Afis. How is it pronounced? The Kometz Office or Office with the class? Office. Okay. Yosy Reb Office Bereisha. So he was Rosh Hashiva. The Yosy Reb Chanina Avroi, and Reb Chanina sat outside. He sat outside. He didn't come in because I guess he was supposed to be the Rosh Hashiva, but he didn't want to step on the officer's toes. So therefore, he didn't come in. He stayed outside. Let's see if Rashi speaks about it. Rashi doesn't say. He did. Why? He wasn't under the rule of Reb Office because he was appointed by Rebbe. So he stayed outside. I guess not to threaten Reb Office's office. The Asa Levi, and Levi to support Reb Chanina, he came and sat the Yosef Gabei. He sat near Reb Chanina. I guess they were chavushas that looked outside the Bespedish. Noch nafshi the Reb Office. Then Reb Office was nifter. The Yosef Reb Chanina Bereisha. Now Reb Chanina became Rosh Hashiva, and now Levi lost his chavusha job. Levi inish l'meisav Gabei. Now Levi didn't have anybody to sit with, so he decided, I'm leaving. Because also the bubble, he picked himself up and he moved the bubble. And that explains why they told Rav in Babel when Levi arrived, Gav Rabbi Iklid Nardo, a great Persian arrived to Nardo, Umetla, and he happens to be handicapped, Vidorish, and he's teaching us the following Hilchah Shabbos, Kalila Shari, this very beautiful adornment that wealthy women used to wear, you're allowed to wear on Shabbos. Why? Because we're not concerned that she'll take it off to show to her friends, because very well the queen never pulled off her crown to say, hey, check this out. A regular woman will maybe show off something, but not someone who's so wealthy. And therefore, there's no problem wearing it on Shabbos. Omar, when Rav heard that Levi came to Nardo, he said it must be Shema Mina Nach Nafshi de Rav Afis. This is a Talmudic logic. If Levi's here, I can figure out that Rav Afis must have died. And therefore, Yosy Reb Chanina Bereisha, and Le'hava Leila Levi Inish L'meisav Gabei, and therefore V'ka'asa. It's fair to Gemara, who said that's the right cheshbon? Maybe Rav should have made a different cheshbon. Maybe Reb Chanina Nach Nafshi. Maybe Reb Chanina died. Reb Avos could be Yosef Yosef. But since Reb Chanina died, Le'hava Leila Levi Inish L'meisav Gabei. And Levi didn't have anybody to hang out with. And therefore V'ka'asa. That's why he came. There's two reasons why that wouldn't have been an option. Iba Yiseba, Levi Reb Office, Mechav Havakayif. If Reb Chanina would have died, then he would have went in to become part of the yeshiva, and he would have been marking himself under the Rosh Hashiva Reb Office. So the fact that he came means it must be that Reb Chanina is Rosh Hashiva. Another reason, Iba Yiseba, even though Reb Chanina Bachama Yeshiv B'Rosh L'Sagul De'Malach. Everyone knew that Rebbe said that Reb Chanina Bachama is going to be the Rosh Hashiva. So it's impossible that he would die before Reb Office. Because if Rebbe said he'll be the Rosh Hashiva, he's going to be the Rosh Hashiva. So therefore he knew that in fact it was Reb Office who died, Reb Chanina got promoted, and Levi, because of that, is now looking for some company. It says by Tzadikim, when a Gadol makes a Gzeira, it happens. In fact, Gemara, Reb Chia was very great. So maybe Reb Chia should have been the Rosh Hashiva. So Rashi, V'lemani Rebbe Rosh Hashiva. Why did Rebbe say Reb Chanina should be the Rosh Hashiva? Why didn't Rebbe say that Reb Chia should be the Rosh Hashiva? So Gemara Noch Nafshi, Reb Chia had already died. I saw the Mita or the cave of Rebbe, of the Moish, and I cried from sadness that Rebbe died. So clearly Reb Chia survived Rebbe. Let's say Rebbe said this about Reb Chia. Say that the Rebbe said that the day Reb Chia died was Batla Kedusha. Vatanya says, Rebbe, when Rebbe got sick, Nichnas Reb Chia Etzloi, he saw Rebbe crying. Rebbe, why are you crying? It's not a good sign to cry before you die. If you die with happiness, simin yafalai. That's a good simin. It's a good simin. Let's see if Rashi speaks on this. Rashi does not. For other cases, he does. If someone's crying, simin raloi, it's not a good simin. Panav l'mayla, if his face is up, simin yafalai. Panav l'mata, simin raloi, it's a bad simin. Panav klapei if he's facing the nation, simin yafalai. Klapei chayzul, if he's facing the wall, simin raloi. Panav yuroikin, if his face is green or yellow, simin raloi. Panav tzuven, if it's glowing, vadumam red, simin yafaloi. Mace bear of Shabbos, simin yafaloi. Someone who dies bear of Shabbos is a simin yafaloi. Rashi says he's going to go straight to menucha. B'motzoi Shabbos, and if someone dies on motzoi Shabbos, simin raloi. It's not a good simin. Mace bear of Kapurim, simin raloi, because he didn't have a kapara. Motzoi of Kapurim, after you said a kapara, simin yafaloi. Mace mechayim ma'ayim, someone who dies from an upset stomach, simin yafaloi. That's a good simin. If they rubam shel tzadikim, misasim b'chayim ma'ayim. Most tzadikim die because of chayim ma'ayim. I think we learned once because they can't afford good food because they're poor because they're involved in the voice of goyish, so they suffer from their stomach. Remember we had dates that they eat. Rebbe said, "I'm not crying for myself that I'm dying, which will be a bit bad simon. I'm crying because I know after I die I will no longer be able to learn Torah and be Mekai mitzvahs." You say so you see here, in fact, that Reb Chia survived Rebbe. You say maybe the whole story is different. Maybe it was Reb Chia who was the chayla, and it was Rebbe who asked him why he was crying. Really, Reb Chia Taka survived Rebbe. So why didn't Rebbe appoint Reb Chia as the Rosh Hashiva? Because Reb Chia also the mitzvahs hava. He was busy with mitzvahs for Rebbe Sover le'afkarei. I don't want to pager him. I don't want him to make him into a Rosh Hashiva, and then they'll be busy. They'll pager him all day long. Better let him be Yosy in his mitzvahs undisturbed. V'hainu, and this explains the Chiyava Mintzu, Reb Chanina v'Reb Chia. When Reb Chanina and Reb Chia would argue in learning, Amalei Reb Chanina l'Reb Chia, Reb Chanina would tell Reb Chia, "V'hadid the mitzvahs, you're arguing with me? I mean, I have chlorite. I'm for sure right. You know why? Even if Chas v'Shalom Torah would be forgotten from Klal Yisrael, Madrana leimi pilpulei, I would be able to bring it back through my pilpul. I'd be able to restore halachas just because I'll be able to figure it out with pilpul. Amar Reb Chia, Greisa Knacker, Ana Abdi, the loy mishtach Torah Yisrael. I would be able to make it that Torah shouldn't be forgotten from Klal Yisrael in the first place. What would I do? And this is good. This Gemara is in Gittin as well. Daisina Kisna, I would bring flax seeds. Vushadjaina, I would put them in the ground. In other words, I would plant them. Umigadalna Nishvi, and I would grow flax and make nets out of them. V'tzayadna Tavi, and I would capture with the nets deer. Umachilna Bisrili Yasmin, and I would serve the meat of these deer to Yosoimim. V'ardichna Megilta Mimashchedet Tavi, and I would make parchment out of the skin, out of the hide of these deer, and I would go to a city where there's no people to teach the young children. I would write the Chamisha Chumsha Torah for 5 children. Umasnina Shita Sidri L'Shishinuki, and I would teach Shisha Sidri Mishnah to 6 children. L'chol Chad V'Chad Amri, and to each of these children I would say, don't let the chain stop here. Rather, I would say, Asni Sidrach L'Chavrach, teach what I taught you to your friend, so that it passes on. The Hainid Amar Rebbe Kama gedolim ma'asechia, how great is the ma'aseh mafia? So the Vilna Gaon asked, why doesn't he just go to the Sforim store, buy Chumash and learn? Why does he have to go through this whole process? Zok the Vilna Gaon, the Rebbe said it over ever so eloquently, is that in order for Torah to have kiyum, the Torah has to be pure from its very, very source. If he would buy Svarim in the store, does he know if there's Chilul Shabbos involved in the printing? Does he know if there's Gnev involved in the printing? Does he know if there's any problem involved in the printing? No. He wanted to make sure that the entire supply chain from the very source was pure for mitzvahs. And that's the only way to have a kiyum of Torah. For Rebbe used to always tell us, if you learn Torah and it's supported by stolen money, that Torah is not going to have kiyum. The source of the money has to be pure. No. He said, I would make it that Torah should never be forgotten. So if you teach it with complete purity from the source, then Torah will never be forgotten. So this is an important lesson. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, the first and last time he ever spoke by a Torah Masora convention, he asked, how is it that in the Friedrich Adar in Europe, they made Gedolim Olam, and they didn't have good facilities, and they didn't have good diets, and people were way more so professionally trained, and the children were hungry and tattered. We have a much better system, yet we don't produce the same Gedolim. So because the money that pays for our chinuch isn't so pure. They never let us think the answer. But I'll call upon them. You see that the purity of the money has a great impact in how long the Yiddishkeit will last. Amalei Rab Shimon by Rabbi, afilu mimcha. Are you telling me that Reb Chia is even greater than you, my dear father Rebbe? Amalei in. Amalei Rab Shmuel by Rabbi Yosy, afilu me'abba. Was Reb Chia even greater than my father? Amalei chas v'sholem. Lo itehei kizois b'Yisrael. Zok Rashi, I would never say that Reb Chia is greater than your father. I can say he's greater than me. Amr lahen livni katan anitzarach. Then Rabbi said, I need my young child. Nichnach Rab Shimon Etzloi. Rab Shimon, who was his young child, went in to Rabbi. Moser like Sidrei Chachma. He gave him over the Sidrei Chachma. And there's a big shiloh what a Sidrei Chachma is. And those who learned it's Nigla and Nister and all the different Soidis HaTorah, like Ma'aseh Merkava, that you could only give over from person to person. Amalad livni gadol on the Torah. He said, I want my older son. Nichnas Rabbi Gamliel Etzloi. Umasal Sidrei Nesias. He gave him over the Sidrei Nesias, meaning he explained to him how you have to act as a Nasi. He taught him. He gave him a quick primer. Amalai, he told him, Beni Nogni Seisacha Beramen. You have to act very prestigious. So Rashi, you have to be amongst the greats. Don't associate with the riffraff. Throw bitterness to the Talmidim. In other words, give them dirty glances, scare them. You must be intimidating. You have to maintain a very intimidating stance. And is that so? You should have covered for the Yirei Hashem. So you shouldn't be intimidating them, the Talmidim. Whenever he saw Talmud Chacham, he would stand up from his throne, and he would kiss the Talmud Chacham. He would hug the Talmud Chacham. He would kiss the Talmud Chacham. The Koyel Rebbe, Mari. He would call him Rebbe, Mari. So why are you saying that I should intimidate the Talmidim? So tomorrow, the Tzidna Avada, you have to be Mechabed them and be Mekar them with the greatest warmth. But publicly, you have to maintain a very intimidating persona. So Rashi says, Matla and Emallah, he didn't use that. So people should realize this is us. Tanya, Rebbe Mutal B'Tzipuri. Rebbe was lying in Tzipure. When he was sick, he was in Tzipure. But they buried him in Beis Sharim, which was not near Tzipure. I don't know where these places were. I Vatanya Tzedek Tirdai Holach Acharabi Levesh Sha'arim. It says in the pasuk Tzedek, the Bryce told Tzedek Tirdai, which means that they went after Rebbe in Beis Sharim. So the question is, if he lived in Beis Sharim, they told people if you want to get the right psak halacha, go to Rebbe. Where does Rebbe hold his court? In Beis Sharim. So you see, he was in Beis Sharim, not in Tzipurei. So that's where you're right. The Beis Sharim happened. That's where he normally lived. Elakim the Chalosh, when he got sick, Hamtul Tzipurei. They took him to Tzipurei. Why? The medallia ubasam avira. It has a higher elevation and it has very good air quality, and therefore they decided to bring him there. Okay, let's stop here because we're davening in 2 minutes, and the Mishnah will Imam tomorrow, an hour before midnight.